we have not talked about the defending champs yet in Baylor because SP Plus has them projected to finish 5th.
Yeah.
Does the algorithm just hate Blake Shapen or what? What's going on here, Bill?
Well, that is part of it, just in that, like, it looks at the quarterback position and then says, well, you just lost 74% of last year's passing yards. That's probably, that could be a problem right there. And it doesn't, it's not going to be programmed to realize, well, Shapen kind of displaced those 74% of passing yards. And I mean, on the other side of that, we also know that Shapen's only thrown 86 passes, so we think he's going to be good. We don't have all the evidence in the world on that just yet. But I think the biggest issues for Baylor, I mean, the skill core got destroyed. Losing Abram Smith, losing Tyquan Thornton, and basically 5 of last year's top 6 targets. That's a huge deal. The secondary got hit really, really hard. There were 7 guys who got at least 300 snaps last year. 2 of them are back. So SP Plus is designed, the returning production formula is designed to look at what generally tends to have the most impact. Like losing your running back actually doesn't really impact next year's SP Plus rating that much. Losing a bunch of receivers and a bunch of defensive backs does. So even if we say that they're artificially low because it doesn't understand what Shapen can do, they're still going to be projected to fall because of the receiving core and the defensive backs. That's hard for me because offensive line is going to be really good. Defensive line, they just added Jackson Player. Jackson Player was one of my favorite players in the country the last 2 years. In the trenches, it might just be that they're so good that they can account for the rest of that. You can't really attack their vulnerable secondary because their defensive line is just so dominant, but it's still, I at least understand why the numbers say what they say. That's really all I can ask for.
Yeah. I know, just like personally, and I think Gabe probably feels the same way. Like offensive production, like the key to that football team is their running game.
Yeah.
And I know they lost their running back, but that system is really the key. And I'm fairly confident that they're going to find a guy that can do what they're asking him to. And it's the running game is going to be there, and that's going to help everything else because they were a pretty limited passing team last year. And that's what's, for me, so scary. And I can see like they're 5th. I think there is room for volatility there, but you got to think that Shapen, for a coach to tell the starter from a year ago to find another place to play because we're going with this other kid, it makes you feel a little bit worried about how good they may be.
Yeah, I mean, that was Aranda knew if I name Shapen the starter now, Bohannon's absolutely entering the transfer portal tomorrow, and he did it anyway. That does tell you something. And I can say they lost Abram Smith. They also invented Abram Smith. Like he was a linebacker. Like he wasn't some 6,000 career yards kind of rusher that Grimes inherited and just rode with. He, like, that system invented 1,600 yard rusher Abram Smith. And Tay McWilliams, it's hard to make more of an impression in 17 carries than he did. Like half of them went for 10 plus yards. A couple of went for 40 plus. Like it's very easy to make assumptions that could be proven true. It's, like I said, the numbers don't make assumptions like that. It's pretty easy to be pretty confident though.
Yeah. Looking at TCU being projected at 6th. I know that SP Plus doesn't really take in coaching changes as part of, the numbers it spits out. I like Sonny Dykes, but you've got an interesting situation at quarterback there with Max Duggan and Chandler Morris, but that defense sucked last year.
It was terrible.
I mean, they sucked, and it was shocking to watch.
Yeah.
So why do you think TCU is projected ahead of teams like Tech and Iowa State, West Virginia?
It was funny. I mean, they were 38th on offense last year and 109th on defense. And you're like, wait, this is Sonny Dykes' first year? He wasn't already there last year to produce that? That felt kind of, I mean, he was able to figure out some answers on defense, but that's still, that's kind of the prototype Dykes type of team, I guess. But no, I mean, the major reason they're projected to do pretty well, their defense is still projected to be pretty bad. Because not only did you have a terrible defense last year, you just lost Mathis and Coleman too, like maybe your two most disruptive defenders. But he propped up the defense a decent amount with just a volume of transfers, right? Like 3 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, 3 defensive backs. That's going to help a little bit from a production standpoint. But really, it's what they return on offense. They were 38th last year. They're projected to improve to 12th because they returned basically every receiver. Max Duggan's back. The offensive line is experienced, and then on top of that, he added Bailey from Louisiana. I love that guy. He's a really, really solid running back, and a couple linemen who played as well. So it's all offense. They're 12th overall on offense, and that basically props them up. Obviously Texas Tech's kind of in a similar situation in terms of strengths and weaknesses there, or experience and lack thereof. But that ends up, the fact that Tech lost their starting quarterback to transfer, again, kind of a shapen situation in that, like, Donovan Smith and Tyler Shough are both probably maybe better than the guy who took the most snaps last year, but injuries kind of roughed that position up a little bit for Tech. But no, it comes down to, like, TC just has a few more proven entities on offense, and that makes the difference with Tech, at least.
Always forget his name, Gabe. You always have to save me. The wide receiver was
Quentin Johnston.
Yes.
Yeah.
I can't ever remember his name. I'm an idiot. I think that he may, because of how the volume of passing and what you're going to see from this offense.
Yep.
Just statistically, he may end up being one of the leading receivers in the country this year.
Yeah. Yeah. He's going to be one of the numbers I really like that Sports Info Solutions produces and that I get to play with. And I know PFF has a version of this too, basically yards per route run. It's like, it ends up being a combination of, like, explosiveness and efficiency, and then just how frequently you were used in the passing game. You need all 3. If you're just out running routes on every single play and you're throwing 1 ball a game, doesn't really matter if it's like a 40-yard catch, you're not going to grade out very well in this regard. Quentin Johnston was at 2.6 yards per route run. That's really high end right there. Anything over 2 is good, and it suggests that he could probably handle a lot more of a load and still produce at a high level. Darius Davis and Tate Barber were also over 2. They were 2.1 each. So yeah, it seems like they've got the tools, especially if Duggan. I mean, if he can handle the offense, it seems like he's got a high ceiling. Chandler Morris did pretty well when he was in the game last year too. So yeah, it seems like they got all the pieces they need on offense.
Yeah, so we're going to mark the podcast right here to insert some ads. So if you guys could do us a solid and just listen to them, that'd be a great. Tell the people to listen to them, Bill.
Absolutely. I never, ever skip ads on a podcast.
Absolutely.
Ever.
So here are those. Okay, Texas Tech projected 7th in SP Plus. Really, I'll believe they play good defense when I see it, but I would assume any success they have is going to be based off Zach Kittley, the new offense coordinator, and that offense. I don't know if it's going to be Donovan Smith, Tyler Shough, quarterback. That is to be determined, but I assume the offense is going to be the strength of that football team.
Yeah, that's a safe assumption. I mean, special teams was good last year too, so maybe that plays into it a little bit, but. No, I mean, even with some solid turnover in the receiving core, which is a thing. I mean, 4 of their top 5 targets are gone. Having Smith and Shough there, having a lot of options, I would say, in the backfield. Taj Brooks ended up getting fewer carries than Sir Roderick Thompson, but like 6.5 yards per carry, did really well or showed potential in the passing game as well. I think he's a really interesting weapon. I guess it comes down to, is what we saw from Zach Kittley? Is it just, open box, insert great offense, from this point forward? Is it just going to produce like we saw last year? Obviously, when he went to Western Kentucky last year, he brought so many good pieces with him. It was like Western Kentucky was playing the Houston Baptist offense with the Houston Baptist 2 deep. But if he really just has the answers, if this is just his offense and they're, going to start playing at a top 15 or 20 level offensively because of it, that's a good team. I mean, the defense really shouldn't be horrible. especially by Tech standards. The bar is pretty low, but they have a chance to be at least average. I like. He made some interesting moves in the portal, like Vidal Scott, the Arkansas State guy, bringing in like what's his name, Blankenbaker. Everybody added a Wyoming transfer. It seems like it's like you just wanted to take a piece of that culture and bring it to your program. But if those guys are at least decent, like this should be by Tech standards an okay defense, and the offense is obviously massive potential. Again, SP Plus isn't going to take that into account. They just see you're pretty good offensively last year. You'll probably be pretty good again. But Kitley's kind of the wild card here because that offense was so fun to watch last year.
What's your thoughts on Donovan Smith? There's moments where you see him on the field and you think, oh my God, this guy is going to be an absolute monster. And then there's moments where, he looks like a young, inexperienced quarterback. Big, fast, looks like a deer running out there, has a capable arm. I mean, it looks like a very potent mix of skills for a guy, if they can ever get it out of him.
Yeah, I mean, he had just enough of a sample size last year to be super confusing, just in that like 17 for 22 against Oklahoma, 25 for 32, just torches Iowa State, a very good Iowa State defense. Torches Mississippi State with big plays. Has a major efficiency against Baylor in a game they easily could have won. That's all awesome. He also went 9 for 29 for 83 yards against Oklahoma State. So I mean, the fact that he had that
Caleb
game,
Williams, basically,
right? Like he had that game. But he still ended up like 61% completion rate, nearly 150 passer rating. I think for a freshman, and again, you're right, he's big, he can move. I would assume he gets the tiebreaker here. If they just cannot figure out if it's Smith or Shug at quarterback or Morton, I know, they've got a pretty good, well-touted redshirt freshman as well. You have to figure his youth and his running ability and size and everything else, you have to figure that's a tiebreaker here, and they end up leaning on him just for the future. But Shug was still more productive on average in his tiny sample. So I mean, I guess if you're, he still has an obvious chance.